coming up on this episode of Free Lunch.
And there's not one artist that I know who is considered a good artist, whether it's a photographer, painter, dancer, singer, MC, or what have you, that says, I started to want to do this thing and became really good at it because I wanted to make a lot of money, right? You know, who were we were all into hip hop. They were in breakdance, doing graffiti, things like that. I was horrible at all of those. So what type of camera can I purchase to make my photos look like yours? And so my answer is always the same. That camera has yet to be invented. Invest in yourself. You know what I mean? And yeah, there's a cost associated with that. You know what I mean? But again, we live in the digital age. There's a lot of stuff you can learn for free.
It's Free Lunch with a special thanks to our sponsors. Gun Safety 203, firearms training for youth, beginners, and advanced. Get trained the right way the first time. Visit gunsafety203.com. The Michael Stroud Team, real estate excellence. They get you what you want. Visit michaelstroudteam.com. Home Stretch Travels, providing reliable transportation for business, university rideshare, even your treasured pets. Day or night, work or play, when you need a driver, visit homestretchtravels.com. And don't forget our brand placement sponsors this season, Dobie and Rollins Orthodontics. Excellence, excitement, and empathy, helping you love your smile. Visit www.dr-orthodontics.com. And Daddy Butter, handmade, all natural hair and skincare made with love by dads. Visit daddybutter.com. What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Freestyle Gospel, aka The Real Frii, with another episode of Free Lunch. And here we have a special episode because you see me on location with today's guest, none other than the iconic Elm City photographer himself, Jonathan Bailey. Give it up for him, y'all. What's going on, man?
How you doing, Chris? Thanks for doing this.
I get the added benefit, obviously, guys, of him being a past guest. If you've caught that episode, I think that was season 2, where we actually moved into our new studio location in New Haven. He was polite enough to visit us there. So thank you for having us. You've set the place up magnificently. I've been trying to, the whole time we've been here, get like tips of like, hey, how can I get this set up at my studio to look like this? But again, this is the manifestation of what it actually means to be a photographer, is the way you do this thing with light. And I don't think many people know that. So introduce yourself to the audience the way you'd like, and then just, give us like a basic 101 on just what photography is, maybe.
Okay.
You can start like that.
Okay, cool. So as you stated, I'm Jonathan Bailey, owner-operator of Elm City Images in New Haven, Connecticut. Photography, as you stated, has a lot to do with light. In fact, the word photography comes from the Latin photo, meaning light, and graphy, meaning to draw. So essentially, that's what photography is, drawing with light.
So does that mean, like, I know you've, on, I think maybe the past episode we had you on, you might have mentioned it, maybe you didn't, but there's like a kind of a running idea with at least much younger photographers flooding the space today that having the most expensive and the most amazing like camera you can find is how I'm gonna get the excellent pictures. But back to your point about what actually photography is, if you can somehow learn this thing about light, you can really actually have a, even an old camera like this. I mean, how old is that camera?
Oh God, that camera is probably about 60 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's a lot of folks use digital photography now. That's kind of like the latest technology with respect to photography. This is a film camera. That requires,
but it still requires the same basic elements of light.
Exactly. So it's about photography centers itself primarily on exposure, having the correct exposure, and compensation. The way that you compose your shot. So the science of photography, whether it's with film or digital, remains the same. The fundamentals, if you will. So exposure and composition. So as long as you have the right exposure and the right composition, also obviously you want your image to be in focus.
Yeah.
Most of the times, sometimes images are purposely unfocused or defocused, as they say.
So how often do you think we come across a phenomenal camera in the hands of somebody who just doesn't know how to use light and like poor pictures come out? Is that like is that more common than we might want to admit?
Yeah, so it's actually a lot more common than most people admit, and that's oftentimes I come in contact with people who are frustrated. They've invested all this money in the equipment, and they're like, my images are just not coming out the way I want them to do, and you're like,
I need the $10,000 camera.
Right,
That's
exactly.
the answer.
or this is another question that I've heard more times than I would have liked to. Is what type of camera can I purchase to make my photos look like yours? And so I know my answer is always the same. That camera has yet to be invented. And the reason being,
I love that.
Yeah,
that camera has not been invented.
Right, because that's not an ego answer for me or whatever.
It's directing people back to what actually makes a great photo.
Right. It's not about the equipment per se, although the equipment is important. It's really about your knowledge on how to properly use the equipment, and then using that equipment to bring about your idea or vision for the image that you want to create.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like asking Picasso, if he were still alive, what kind of paint and brushes could I purchase so I could
make my paintings come out like yours?
Yeah, exactly. Make my paintings come out.
Exactly.
It's just it just doesn't work that way.
All right, so let's play a quick game of Would You Rather.
Okay.
Would you rather have a $20,000 camera, but you have to sacrifice removing all of your knowledge about light? Or would you rather have a $300 camera and know everything you need to know about light?
The latter, certainly. I take a $100 camera.
Really?
Okay. Yes.
That's how confident you are with the light.
That camera right there. I probably had that camera now 30 years, and so I would shoot with that camera and the knowledge about photography that I've obtained
against anybody trying to just
over the many
pick
decades.
up some gigantic camera with no
without
knowledge
question,
of light.
because again, that camera and lens does not exist.
But they have all these cameras now that these days it's like these automatic settings, and which is why tons of people are going out and just buying a camera and suddenly becoming like these pop-up photographers, because isn't the technology in these expensive cameras really able to do all this kind of light stuff for you?
No, they're not. No? Because at the end of the day, the camera is like any inanimate object. You can have, let's step away from photography for a minute, right? You could have the fastest race car. You could have Ferrari, a Lamborghini, a Porsche, this, that, or whatever. It might look good. It may, smell good. But as a functioning piece of equipment, it is useless until you bring a human being into the equation, right? Yes. So similarly, who knows how to operate it properly, won't crash it and things like that, and make it perform at its peak. Similar with cameras, you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's a great point.
You can buy a $50,000 Hasselblad, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you don't know how to use it, it's as a properly functioning piece of equipment, it becomes useless.
Yeah.
At least in my estimation. Now, there are some people, I hear a lot of photographers, their approach to photography is, I'll fix it in post. And what that means is I'll take the photo.
Excellent.
It doesn't matter.
Photoshop.
Yeah, right, exactly. It doesn't matter what the image looks like at the point of capture. That means that at the point when you pressed the shutter release and captured the image. They're really not concerned with that, because they're saying that, I can fix it in Photoshop or Lightroom. Yeah. And I discourage photographers from doing that. One, because it takes more time then for you to create the final image, number one. You kind of want to be, when you capture the image, most, even whether it's digital or analog with film, requires some level of processing, right? We call it the digital darkroom now, but back in the days when we used film cameras, you had to go in a dark room, you had to develop the film first, and then develop the image on paper, and that was the step-by-step process. So that's not to say that there is not some form of post-production that has to take place, but what you don't want to do is get into the habit of developing yourself as a photographer where you depend on that.
Yeah.
Where that's your go-to or what have you. For a couple of reasons, like I said. One, you want to limit the amount of time that you have to process the images. And then also, if that's what you're doing on a consistent basis as a photographer, then actually you're moving away from being a photographer and being more of a graphic design artist, right? You know what I mean? So,
absolutely.
So there, in my mind, at least, that's, those are two separate areas, two different fields. I know little to nothing about graphic design outside of what is needed for me to process my images.
Or promote your photography.
Right, exactly. So
put a nice flyer together. So how does you're born and raised in New Haven?
Correct.
Right? And you've been doing photography for how long? At this point?
40 years. I got my first camera when I was 15, so about 40 years.
So how does growing up as inner city New Haven, kid, how did someone like yourself even get into photography? Like, I mean, were you born into a family of like photographers already? Like, where does that come from?
My family, I have 3 brothers, older brothers, at different levels, have explored photography. One of them professionally, another
before you,
before me. They're my older brothers, right?
Okay.
Exactly. And one professionally is a professional working photographer right now, Walter Bailey. Shout out to Walter. And 2 other brothers who kind of explored it as kind of like an advanced hobby. Yeah. So I did have a little exposure to that. My father also, when I was a child, little boy, Polaroids, instant cameras where you take the picture and it takes the picture comes right out of the camera. My father always had an instant camera, and he was always known for snapping little snapshots and things like that. So that was my first kind of exposure to photography. Yeah. But from a professional standpoint, or from the standpoint where I became interested and started learning more about photography independent of that, came through a close family friend, friend of my father's, who was not a professional photographer. He was a doctor, in fact, but he had a love for photography and had advanced skills in it. And he was someone who he gave me my first SLR camera, similar to the one that's back here. Not this one, but one similar to it. For those who don't know, SLR stands for single lens reflex. Yeah, camera. I had
no idea. Even what
right, exactly. So you need to turn.
I'm like, it sounds like DSLR, but
no. So
it left the D off.
Right. Well, the D in DSLR is for digital single lens reflex camera. Yeah. So
I had no idea. I had no idea.
Now you do. So again, a friend of my father's who was really into photography, first person to ever give me a film camera, and it was a manual camera where there was no automatic settings and things like that. So you were kind of, in order for me to make it,
you were taking that in the dark room.
Yeah, right, exactly. But even when I was taking the photos, I had to learn exposure. I had to learn the right setting for the lens as well as for the body of the camera where the shutter is.
I can imagine there were a lot less photographers around that time.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like a lot of work to be a photographer back then.
It was, yeah.
No, people aren't rushing to sign up for to learn all that.
No. Definitely. Yeah, it was an art form that a lot of people weren't engaged in beyond like instant photography. A lot of people did have Polaroid cameras, but a lot of people weren't working with, film cameras, SLRs. What became popular like in the 80s were like these point and shoot, is what we used to call them, cameras. And they had automatic settings and things like that. Yeah. But with respect to real photography, to use that term, I really don't like to use that term. I enjoy all types of photography, so I don't want to give that impression.
No shade at the pop-up photographers out there.
Right. Okay. So
we love all of you.
Yeah. But again, you did require a certain skill set in order to be able to use the camera effectively.
So kind of seeing even just, me myself being, growing up in New Haven and seeing kind of the architecture kind of layout, the landscape of the town and how it's changed over the years. What does a young photographer like you all those years ago, like what were the things you enjoyed taking pictures of the most?
So I got my first camera, like I said, when I was around 15 years old. So this would have been in the 80s. And this was the mid to early 80s. And so this was the time of the real birth of hip hop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, hip hop was born in the 70s, late 70s.
And it was like a vibrant town of New Haven. Exactly. Like there was like days of Coliseum.
Yeah, right, exactly. But so what I was interested in at the time really was photographing my friends. You know what I mean? Photographing like
your rap friends, your hip hop friends?
No, just my friends in my neighborhood. But they were like break dancers and they were like, MCs, graffiti artists and things like that. So I kind of was already kind of attracted to that just as a cultural thing. It's being a young man growing up in the Elm City. So that's kind of, when you're a young photographer, you typically, photograph the things that are interesting to you, the things that are a part of, that make up your environment, your family members, things like that. So so a lot of my early photography focused on that. You know what I mean? Photographing my friends, photographing hip hop concerts, hip hop shows, things like that.
Do you have like any of those photos like survived, like those early year?
But certainly not as many as I would have liked. Yeah. Again, I was really just starting out, and at that time I was taking more bad photos than I was good because I was learning. I was working it out and trying to develop a style and trying to figure out again how. To properly expose an image and things like that. So unfortunately a lot of those images haven't survived, but I do have a few. Yeah.
That's awesome. Wow. Some of the, first things I wanted to take pictures of, when I tried to, first pick up a camera, were things that I imagined were hard to capture. Like, so things that I saw moving quickly or fast were things I wanted to just, let me try to freeze that. Or, so I remember having my kids at a park when I first got my DSLR camera, run down like a sidewalk towards me. I'm like, just run as fast as you can. Right. And I'm like playing with the settings and trying to figure out, if I could catch them in motion. Right, yeah. So I love pictures like that. But another thing that Don came across my mind to ask you is when it came to that learning time where you like most of the pictures you said you took were like bad pictures, they weren't great, but when you finally began getting just a even rudimentary like basic kind of hold of like settings and just how this thing works, what was one of the first events or things that you actually got paid for as a photographer? I don't know if you remember that.
Wow.
We're like, you were good enough. Somebody says, you know what, we're going to give you money.
Oh yeah. I remember what this is. So, my first, I've been paid for photography for a number of years now. My first paying job, I really can't say definitively what it was. I would imagine that it was maybe of someone in their family, I did that. Yeah. But what I would consider my really first paying job with a contract and things like that took place in New York City in the 90s, in fact. Yep, it was a hip-hop concert at the Palladium in New York. There were a number of hip-hop artists performing that night. So yeah, that was the first one where someone reached out to me, said they liked my work, that they had this show that was coming up and they were hoping I'd be available and paying me with a check, not just cash out of their pocket. So yeah, so I would say yes, so probably the mid 90s.
Ah man, that had to be exciting of a moment. I think most people remember like that first for whatever it is they're like passionate about. If it's like legit, like this paperwork was involved. I had a piece of paper, a check that had my name on it. Right. That's an awesome feeling. Has that been like your only like passion of, as far as hobbies go in people, who, maybe they have other work that they do. Photography has primarily been like your dominant hobby. Like,
so it's not a hobby.
I mean, before being professionally, like, was that even like from a young man, into young adult, like, was that kind of all you were doing around the way? Like,
no. So
were you into sports?
Nah, never into sports. And what was interesting, I said that, in my early years, my first subjects that I would photograph was my friends, right? Who were we were all into hip hop. They were in breakdance, doing graffiti, things like that. I was horrible at all of those. So if there was a photograph of my friends breakdancing and some doing graffiti,
there was a reason why you were behind the camera.
No. Before I got him, if there was a photograph that was taken of me and my friends during this era, where you would see I would imagine you would see some of my friends breakdancing. You would see some of them rapping on the sidelines.
You were the guy clapping on the side.
You would see some doing graffiti. I was the guy standing there holding the boombox.
You're the boombox, and none of them can do anything without the music.
Right, exactly. So
you had a very
inspiration, right? Yeah, but no, I was that guy just kind of standing on the side, just kind of with the big, huge boombox.
Yes.
So what photography allowed me to do was it kind of brought me into the fold and helped me to kind of immerse myself a little bit more and interact with my friends who were doing all these things. Yes. And more importantly, though, it kind of made me kind of popular amongst my friends who were good break dancers and MCs in the neighborhood or whatever, because everybody would come to me and be like, yo, can we see, did you get the pictures yet? Did you get the pictures developed yet? Did you get the pictures developed yet? And they would want to see the photos. Awesome. Yeah, so that really helped with, with my self-esteem and things like that. So, because I wasn't a good basketball player. I didn't have a good jump shot. I couldn't throw a football, 50 yards.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really
awesome,
kind of,
man. But what I love about that, mind you, that's the first time I've heard that particular story from you, or any story from a photographer like that, actually, is because, maybe people are just not being honest, but I think there's just a very natural part of all of us that wants to find our place, in our niche or community, a way to fit in. Right.
Exactly.
It's very, very normal.
Exactly.
And I think there are many other, whether, young people or, old adults alike, that have a particular talent, they're good at it, and they have not found the way in which they can kind of insert themselves into the present culture, into maybe something else that they admire their, friends being able to do.
Right.
And I think what happens more times than not, or more times than we'd like to admit, is that most people have that experience where, hey, I admire something else the masses or majority of my friends are great at and what they're doing, and because I can't, they simply fall by the wayside, or they fall into depression or being down and out, rather than saying where, hey, I'm great at this.
Right.
And this can come alongside that, or find a place where it could be inserted. So I love that story for that. Is that, I couldn't do those things, but I could do this thing well. And now look, I could totally imagine that scene where, young Jonathan is coming off the school bus or walking, home, and on the way, friends are across the street. See, there's Jonathan. Hey, you get those pictures yet?
Right, exactly. And that's exactly how it would be.
That's exactly, because everybody wants to be able to see themselves, right? Another natural desire is like, we all want to see ourselves in this awesome light, and a photograph captures that.
Yes, right. Yeah, exactly. And another thing that really attracted me to photography, beyond just kind of it being like a shared activity, like you said, is that photography also for photographers offers you an opportunity to do it as a solo activity. Like, so there's plenty of times that I would wake up and I wouldn't have a subject in mind or whatever. I would just take my camera and walk around my neighborhood, and then I'd photograph, a tree, or photograph a building, or photograph a bent up soda can on the ground or whatever. So
that's an excellent point.
Yeah, it really, so photography, there's a lot of ways to engage with it. You know what I mean? You can do it, with other people. You can do it as a single solitary activity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And both provide, equal level of joy for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that's another, like I said, another one of the great things about of photography. There's not a lot of activities that allow for that. You know what I mean? Whether it be basketball or football, you need to require another team. You know what I mean? You need team members. You know, there are some, you know, like painters, I would imagine would have, but unless they're painting a person, you know,
absolutely,
it's often a very an activity, a single activity, a solitude type activity.
So what's the? I know you had, while we were prepping today, you were very intentional about putting certain things here on the table for us to kind of have in the foreground. For you, are these elements that are part of your everyday like photography? What we have here?
Oh yeah, exactly. Oh yeah.
Okay.
So you know, photography, you know, the types of cameras that I use are, we talked about DSLRs. Mm-hmm. This is a DSLR. And so the single lens reflex of that is that the camera can only have a single lens on it. You know what I mean? It can have a variety of different lenses. You know, the lens closest to you, that's what they call a fisheye lens. It has a very wide perspective. That all the way up to what we call a telephoto lens. This is a zoom telephoto lens, meaning that it can zoom out or zoom up very close.
And these are like the super heavy ones, right? Is that why they have like this little like kind of bracket thing on the bottom?
It's that's a we call a tripod collar. So you can kind of, you know, attach this camera, if this lens is attached to the camera.
I see these kind of like sports
you can use
on
that
the
to attach it to the tripod. Yeah,
TV.
A lot of
They look similar to this.
Right, exactly. They're used a lot by sports photographers, but also people, environmental photographers, people who are doing community photography. One of the things that a lens like this allows is for you to, like, again, bring your subjects up close. And so oftentimes when people know that their photos are being taken, you know, they pose or they get nervous or whatever, and the image doesn't come out as powerful as you want. What this allows you to do is to come up close to somebody without having to be up close on them.
Yes.
And so, you know, there's a saying in photography, not mine, but just one that's been around for a number of years, that says that the best photos of people are the ones that they don't know are being taken.
Absolutely.
Right. And I think that everybody's kind of done that at one time or another, had their photo taken and they didn't know that it was being taken. It ends up being a very nice photo. And there's another saying, not mine, but that is well known throughout photography, that says that if your images are not good enough, you're not close enough. So meaning that you're not close enough to your subject. That. So maybe not close like you are, but you haven't brought that image close enough so people can, you know, see the detail, and there's, you know, or you know, it only focuses on the main subject and doesn't have all these distractions in the background or what have you. That saying, in fact, was coined by a combat photographer in Vietnam. His name escapes me. But yeah, that saying that if your images aren't good enough, you're not close enough, because what would happen is they put combat photographers, you know, in the war zone, and they would want to stay in the back, in the rear with the gear, and they'd have these photos, and they really didn't depict, you know, truthfully the horrors of war. And so this photographer, you know, he was known for like embedding with the troops, and instead of carrying a weapon, his weapon was his camera. And then people would see his images and be like, wow, like these images are like so powerful. And he said, yeah, you know, and the reason why those aren't is because they're not close enough. So, you know, if your images aren't good enough, you're not close enough. And whether it's in combat, and I hope no photographers are, you know, I'm a pacifist by nature, you know.
But that makes sense.
Peace over war. I would certainly, that's one thing that I've shared with many young up and coming photographers, that, you know, have questions about their photography and asking about, you know, my images don't seem to be as impactful as I need them to be. I say, you know, kind of, it's not a rule of thumb. It's not, you know, some images, like a landscape image, right? You know what I mean? You wouldn't, you know, if you're trying to do a landscape, you don't need to be up close. You want it to be wide. You want to bring in the entire landscape.
But you know what I love about that saying is, I think it could be sort of like a double entendre. You know, you could be referring to close enough, meaning proximity.
Right.
Or close enough intimately.
Right, exactly.
And so those photographers, like many times I've you know, had the pleasure, just, you know, due to our relationship, watch you photograph other people.
Right.
And because you have a personality that shows through you as a photographer, as you interact with the subject, whether it's a model or someone, it brings these, very carefree and organic emotions upon their face, whether it's a smile or a genuine laugh that you're capturing, right? The photographer has now made themselves closer to the subject, and it assists the photographer now in capturing this amazing photo.
Right. Yeah. And that's important. You know what I mean? There's been times, but when I can avoid it, I try to, and that is not my first contact being with my subject is not at the end of the camera, right? Like, so we've had an opportunity to kind of talk a little bit, what I mean? Yeah, so we can kind of get to know each other. Yeah. So when we're not meeting each other for the first time on a set, you know what I mean? And so that really does help. You know what I mean? And what I tend to do is I tend to kind of share, things about myself so that they can learn about me. So when I approach them in this setting, they can say, oh, this is Jonathan. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I know Jonathan a little bit.
We're just a smidget closer than what we were before.
Exactly. It becomes less of a business transaction, if you will, and more so of like, I actually want to be photographed by this person.
So I love, I love that concept. Like I said, for the reasons I already stated, but I don't think, there are many other photographers that know that little gem, that nugget, making use of it, having an initial contact with their, customers or clients before actually getting behind the camera. But kind of piggybacking off of that, it brought something else to mind. There are maybe a handful of other photographers that I just know of, not necessarily really close to. One of my best friends is a photographer, Eddie Daniels. Shout out to Eddie Daniels, Pure White Lens.
Very good photographer.
There are many other photographers that I know that are struggling in their line of work in photography. Now, what that means, in my mind, I would like to think the majority of the time they're referring to struggling as to mean just being successful photographers. So, more bookings, having more clients, and having their output, the product, the end product of being photographs is where they want it to be. For you, knowing where the present space of photography exists, where it is now, what's the kind of, where the guiding culture and direction of photography, where has been going for the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years, what can you imagine, or what do you even see as the predominant flaw or negative to, hindering photographers from being better photographers? And by way of that, subsequently more successful. If they can be better, they'd be obviously be successful. What do you see as like a barrier, the largest barrier to that?
Well, I'll speak from my own perspective. Yeah. I think it's putting the idea of having a business centered on photography, making that kind of being their primary goal and reason for wanting to engage with photography, as opposed to wanting to focus on being the best photographer they can be first, right? And it's kind of putting the cart before the horse a little bit. I oftentimes, I talk to young photographers who, they'll see me with my camera, out in the community or something like that, and they'll approach me and be like, "Oh, you're a photographer." And I'm like, "Oh yeah," and they go, "Oh," and they dig in their bag or their pocket and says, "Well, I'm a professional photographer too," and they give me their card and things like that. And so they have a website or they have some web presence, Instagram, or check out my Instagram, and that's another thing too. That bothers me a little bit. They put all this, this time and energy into promoting themselves as something, the business of the business of photography, without actually becoming really good at that skill or that craft. And so it does it's almost like a 360 disservice when you approach it that way, right? It's a disservice to them because they've invested their money into this equipment. They're now being frustrated by this equipment because they can't produce the types of images that they want to do. And most times, if they get a client, they have to do this technique, which I don't promote and that I really just don't like. It's called machine gunning it, where they'll go and they'll take 10,000 photographs and really only need like 150, but they have to take so many because they're taking so many bad ones, right? And so then, or they just take a whole bunch of bad ones and then they try to give them to the customer, the client who has paid them for this service, and then the client's frustrated with them and things like that.
But that's an excellent point. That didn't occur to me, but I've definitely thought of it in other contexts and talent areas. Is just that is once you invest money into something, it's a natural then following desire to, hey, I want to either make that money back for most people, and they enter photography from the lens of no pun intended, from the lens of trying to make money.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
I heard I can make a lot of money doing photographs.
Right. Yeah. And I could be around fun and interesting people. I could do parties. I could do,
absolutely.
And they might, you know what I mean?
They are. Many are, in fact.
Well, they are, but again, they're doing themselves a disservice. Even if their end product is something that their client is willing to accept, right? Mm-hmm. Look at everything that it takes in order for them to get there. Again, we talked, I just spoke about this concept of machine gunning it. It's what they're taking 10,000 photos.
A lot of time going into that. Yeah.
You got to take a lot of time. You got to color those images. Kind of separate the good from the bad. Then you got to apply your graphic designer skills to them, because now the images are just so bad that you have to fix them in Photoshop. And then you really don't learn anything about the art of photography, because you're spending all your time and then being frustrated by it as well. Because if you're frustrated by something, it's not going to be something that that you're drawn to oftentimes. It's something you're going to want to avoid, right? Yeah, so now you're taking less photographs, you're not developing and honing your skills, because you have to do that even when you're not getting paid. Like for me, I didn't go to college for photography, but I have invested thousands, tens of thousands of dollars in education of photography. Yeah. I learned photography when there was no YouTube. So you would have to sign up, mail in your registration or whatever with your check and go, and you'd have to physically sit there or travel to New York City, and things like that. And so, so invest the time and travel and paying to get on the train and all that. And so I can see how, it's appealing to people, or at least they can have the false impression that, I can learn it on YouTube. I mean, you can learn a lot of stuff on YouTube. I learned stuff on YouTube, but still you have to make an investment in the time, and you have to approach it. Photography is a true art form. Mm-hmm. And there's not one artist that I know who is considered a good artist, whether it's a photographer, painter, dancer, singer, MC, or what have you, that says, I started to want to do this thing and became really good at it because I wanted to make a lot of money.
Yeah, no.
Their story never begins like that. It'll probably begin similar to mine. I met somebody who was a photographer, and I found it interesting, and then I got a camera, and did all these things. Yeah. And then what developed out of that, kind of by mistake, was I started getting pretty good, and people would see my images and be like, "Hey, would you take a portrait of me and my family? I'll pay you." The idea of getting paid for photography never really entered my mind as kind of like an idea, a business model, or even as a career. You know what I mean? I just loved it so much, and that the internal joy that it brought for me, I would do it for free. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what people say, right? About a careers. If you can find something that you're good at, a career that you're good at, and that you would do for free, you'll never work a day in your life. Yeah. And so for me, that's how I feel about photography. I'm blessed and appreciate the fact that people like my photography so much that they're willing to invest in it and hire me to photograph them, or whatever it is that they would like for me to photograph. But truly, really, if I never got paid to do photography another day in my life, and I lived to be another 50 years, I would still be creating images and taking photographs. Yeah, right, exactly. Because for me, that provides a level of joy that no money can. Yeah. That I could make all the money in the world of photography, but that feeling that and joy that photography brings me can't be purchased. That's just one of those things that you can't put a price on.
What would you say is one of the most exciting moments for you in your photography career thus far? Like, whether it's an amazing event you got an opportunity to be a photographer at, or amazing person, celebrity. I know you've photographed celebrities, whether it's been like commercial work, maybe product photography you had a chance to take a picture of. Like, what's been like that mountaintop moment as a photographer, and you're like, wow, I can't believe I'm getting a chance to take pictures?
There's been a lot, but I'm assuming you're talking about from a business perspective, or you're talking about just in general.
I would imagine that the mountaintop would have been a business transaction or moment, but it could have not. Okay. So I just mean something where you were taking pictures and you were just blown away that this was a moment or a thing that you were having the opportunity to take.
So there's several. You know what I mean? Most of them are personal in nature. You know what I mean? Like I get to photograph my kids, I get to photograph you and your siblings, things like that. And that brings me joy. But I think what you're asking is kind of just like when you talked about like, wow, I can't believe I'm here or whatever.
Yeah.
There's been a few, but I would say one thing that one time I was in Europe. I photographed. Prague Fashion Week, and I was in a pit with all the international photographers from around the world.
Wow!
And what was interesting was, I'm sure that this was probably just is what it was. This the Fashion Week. For those who are watching and don't know, is probably one of the premier fashion industry events. It lasts over the course of several weeks. And it's an international show, so they have one in New York, they have one in Paris, they have one in London, they have one in Prague, the one that I'm referring to. And so, being there, Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week, being in the pit is at the end of the runway. Like, it's the best seat in the house.
Yeah.
So like, people see fashion shows, they see people lined up, and then, but when the models are walking towards the camera, the photographers are in front of them. They're walking towards the photographers, right? And all of these world famous brand name designers, it was their show, and just being there. And I was the only American photographer in the pit at this specific show, and I was the only photographer of color.
Oh man!
So that was the part that was really exciting for me. Again, not to make it a racial thing or anything. I'm sure it had nothing to do with. I mean, it's just it is what it is sometimes. There's more black photographers than there are white photographers, But in this one instance, I was the only American photographer, and I was the only photographer of color, and I was right in the front of the pit. So I'm like literally in the front, and there's like 30 other photographers behind me, like stacked in rows and levels.
Wow.
It was so cool. Yeah, man. It was really,
That's awesome.
It was really, really cool.
So how large is that pit so-called area? Like,
it's huge because it's fairly large. You know what I mean? It's roomy. It's like people aren't jockeying and things like that.
Yeah.
It's pretty. It's at the end of the large runway, and the pit is there, and it's important that the photographers be able to work freely within the pit, because those images are going to be seen worldwide. They're going to be seen in magazines. You know what I mean? And for promotional materials for other fashion weeks and things like that. Yeah, they're going to be on the designers' websites and things like that.
Yeah.
So the pit is a real cool place to be. What I don't like about the pit, you didn't ask this, but we're talking about it, so maybe some photographers will get something out of this who are interested in fashion photography, is that oftentimes a lot of your images look identical to all the other photographers because you're shooting the same subject and you're shooting from the same perspective.
Yes.
Straight on. Like, so I'm not getting the side angle shots.
Yeah.
Right? We're all getting these straightforward shots. But what's good about it, though, is beyond just experience, is that all of those photographers are shooting for a specific purpose, whether it be for a magazine, for the designer, for a website, you know what I mean, or things like that. So they're going to get the single credit for the images that they produce, as they should. And it's going to more than likely be in an outlet that you're not going to see someone else's image and be like, oh, I saw this on this website, or I saw this magazine. I thought, Steve or Jonathan shot that. You know what I mean? When in fact, you know what I mean? Yeah. So but
is it one of those things where, again, you guys are all shooting the same angle, but it's like we like look to your, left, your right, and like everybody has like predominantly the same camera too? Or
yeah, you get that. Yeah, no. Because so if you're a working photographer, you're gonna put a lot of wear and tear in your cameras. Most digital cameras have an actuation life of at least 250 actuation. I should explain. Actuations are when you press the shutter release button and you take a photo. That's an actuation. So that shutter is only gonna do that so many times. And so in saying that, so if you're let's say that you're a runway or fashion photographer, for one shoot, you could, now talking about machine gunning it, that's probably the only time, it would be appropriate to do that, because it's like sports photographers, they take a lot of images because it's moving fast, you know what I mean, and things like that. And you need to take a lot of images because things could move out of focus and things like that. Yep. But in doing that, you're, and then when you're a working photographer, you're always taking your stuff out of the bags and putting it down. It's to put a lot of wear and tear in your equipment. So you're always buying new equipment, and then when you're buying it, you're always buying the latest and greatest, right? Yeah, so you're not going to, purchase a camera that came out 5 years ago, I mean, when you can purchase one that just came out that has the latest technology in it and things like that. Yeah,
so with being somebody that you're willing to do this, just passionately, for fun, even if you didn't make any money, and understanding you do it professionally though. Where do you see now where you plan to take your photography specifically going forward in a professional context? Like, so we know you just enjoy just the art of taking photos, period, across the board. But professionally speaking, where do you see yourself, Elm City Images, kind of going forward?
So most of my current photography is what would be defined as commercial photography, meaning that I work primarily with people who are working in some other industry and they require images, whether they're selling a product or they are a fashion designer or a model or what have you. So that's where I've kind of been focusing my career in photography over the past 5 or more years. But moving forward, I think I want to kind of get back more so into photographing people who aren't necessarily connected to an industry or not wanting to be photographed for the sake, they want the photographs for their own personal use or what have you. So, whether it's like a doctor, he needs, a photograph of himself for the purpose of promoting his practice, not a model who wants to be photographed, you know what I mean, in the latest outfit or whatever.
Or glamour shots.
Or glamour shots and things like that, you know what I mean? So I'll do some things like that. And, focusing more on people photography in their environments. So coming out of the studio, a lot of my work happens here at my studio. And that can be, although it's good to shoot in the studio because it's a controlled environment, it can also kind of eliminate some of the challenges that come with photography. Like, I know what every piece of equipment in the studio does. I know what it can do, what it can't do, what its limitations are, and things like that. Where when you're in a community, in an environment that you don't control, I can't control whether or not it's raining today, or that the sun's out and it's too bright, you know what I mean, or whatever, or that there are not people around or whatever. If I want to photograph, people walking in a park or things like that, I want to kind of direct my photography in more of a personal direction, if that makes sense to you. Personal for me and for the people that I'm photographing.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So I'm, again, taking photographs of maybe someone who has a small business, maybe photographing just individuals who want, couples who want, an intimate portrait of themselves, things like that.
It sounds like as a photographer, you'd like to get closer.
Yeah.
That's what it's sounding like.
The
longer I hear you.
Yeah, exactly, right. And like we said, if your images aren't good enough, you're not close enough.
I love it.
But so I guess the short answer would be, doing more people photography. And when I mean people, I mean real life people. Not to say that, models and fashion designers aren't.
Not coming for any of the models.
But they have an ulterior motive oftentimes. You know what I mean? They're looking for a specific look. And that's fine, you know what I mean? And I cater to that, you know what I mean? But when those types of people come into the studio, they already have like a vision oftentimes about how they want the images to look, how they want them to be staged, and things like that. So for me, that eliminates a big part of the artistic aspect of photography.
Yeah.
So I want to move away from that a little bit, you know what I mean? Not eliminate it totally, you know what I mean? But certainly not have that be at the center of my work, which it has been a lot.
Yeah.
At least for the last 5 years.
Do you have any like moments in photography? Maybe I think they would probably happen more often in those scenarios where they are like more real moments, like, photography of people who, like, let's say it's not for a commercial application, whether it's models or agency, but, maybe a community event or things like that. Do you have any of those moments in just photography across the board that's like, that you could share with us, of course, one that wouldn't be too bothersome, but one that you could share, like, one of your like most embarrassing moments as a photographer? Have you had any of those? I know I had. Well, yes. I guess not embarrassing. I'll lead first just to like stick myself out there. But I had like this, event where, and you can tell me what you would have done, where I took photography of an individual. And like, no shade on them, love everybody. But one of the individual's eyes was like a cockeyed, right? So they had an eye like over here going this way, and the other one was straight. And so I'm back home, I'm editing the photos, and I see it, and I'm just now learning the whole like Photoshop thing and like, picture editing. So I get this bright idea that, let me see if I can like fix the eye, right? So I do all the setting. I'm probably working on this eye for probably like 2 hours. Long story short, it comes out dead on. Like I think I might have just like kind of cut out and like copy the eye that was straight and whatever.
You sent it to the client.
It looked amazing. No. So the question was, now what do I do with this image? Do I send it to the client, or do I send the original one, still edit it, but with their eye fine? So, because I couldn't like make up my mind and not in feeling too like shamed or thinking I'd offend somebody, I didn't send the corrected shot. I sent them just the photos just the way it was. That was like my moment. What would have you done if that was you? Like, would you have sent them both?
I would. That's what I was gonna say. I would have sent them both.
Okay. I was too scared.
I would have sent them both, but what you would have run the risk in doing outside of offending them is creating more work for yourself, because you said it took you 2 hours to correct that one image. And then I'm sure you took more than one image of them.
Of course.
They would have been like, great, I want you to do that for all of them. so now you have that. But for me, the most, I haven't had a lot of embarrassing moments professionally as a photographer, thank God. But that speaks to, being prepared as a photographer, you know what I mean? And knowing your craft.
You're just like showing up and like, I swore I had that camera in that bag. No. I should have been in with no camera.
Nope, that's never happened. Because typically when I'm doing a paid job, I travel with double everything, 2 cameras, 2 flashes, multiple lenses, you know what I mean? Maybe not double lenses, but certainly lenses that can...
Options.
If they're zoom, they can zoom to the focal length that I need, like a 50 millimeter, you know what I mean? Or something like that, or 85 millimeter. So I don't have to bring a fixed 85 millimeter lens when I can just bring this 70 to 200 that zooms to 85. Yeah. So that's what I mean. So, but definitely 2 bodies, 2 flashes, things like that. So that's never been an issue, right? And I can't remember a time when a camera fell, batteries run out, but I bring multiple batteries. But I would say, oh God, one of my most embarrassing moments while capturing images, I will say, I've taken photographs, happened when your younger brother, Langston, was probably about 2 years old. So I take him to Edgewood Park. You know where Edgewood Park is here in New Haven. I take him down by the pond. And, we're feeding the ducks, and if you bring bread and throw the bread in the water, the ducks will run right up to you. And just the ducks will, almost eat right out of your hand. So I started doing it. I'm teaching your brother this concept, getting him used to the ducks, and the ducks, so he jumps right into it. He's like, he's not afraid of the ducks or what have you. So he's at the edge of the water and he's throwing the bread to the ducks. And I got my long zoom lens, zooming in on them so I'm not interfering with it. I'm not starting, I'm capturing those images we talked about. The ones you're not knowing being taken are the best ones. Yeah. And I'm using the zoom lens. So I'm quite a few feet away from him. So he's there doing it. Everything's going fine. My God. Everything's going fine.
I don't like where this is going.
And then at a split second, no notice or what have you, your brother throws the last piece of bread in the water and then starts to run to the water because the ducks are now like ignoring him because he doesn't have any bread, but he wants to play with the ducks. He starts doing the toddler, stumble to the water, and I go bolting with my camera in my hand. And here's the funny part. As I get to the edge of where the water is, it's muddy and it's slippery. And when I tell you my feet flew from underneath me and I landed square
with the camera?
With the camera. I'm holding the camera up because I'm trained. I'm instinctively known.
I will not sacrifice.
That's something as a photographer, we stumble and we fall sometimes and we lose our balance.
Save the camera at all costs.
Exactly. I slipped and bang and fell square on my butt. And that was enough because I'm calling your brother's name out. Yeah. Thank God he kind of stopped. He didn't get in the water, but he was right at the edge. So he had stopped and was waiting for me to come and get him. But right before I got to him, I was maybe 10 feet. Bang. And this lady is there.
So he stops after you fall.
He stops, right? So this other lady is there sitting on the bench behind me. I didn't even notice she was there. She's there with her kids. And then she says, "Now that's a photograph."
No one was there to take that picture.
And she's cracking up. And I'm so pissed. But at the same time, I'm so happy that my son your brother's not
for two things. Happy I got the boy and happy
right, exactly.
My camera lives
right, exactly. And so, but the woman's laugh was so funny, and it was one of those infectious laughs.
Oh yeah.
I started laughing. I couldn't help or whatever. But she was kind enough to come over and help me up and get your brother's hand and things like that. So yeah, so that's probably my most embarrassing.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Have you now taking pictures of families? Other people's families is like what you've done for a long time. I remember you saying like that early on, like that was some of your first pictures. Having right in here, you do like whole family photo shoots in here?
So no, not so much, honestly. Like I said, most of my work centers primarily on commercial photography. Okay. I'll do, I'm asked, a lot to do that by, people.
Or maybe go to someone's home or an event to do
No, I rarely do that. And the times that I do it, it's more so as a favor to a close, personal friend or something like that. Don't get me wrong. I mean, if some people, this is a business.
Yes.
Everyone
has a price.
Exactly. Right. And there's been a couple of instances where that is. And what I'll typically.
What's that, Mr. Bailey? You don't take family photos?
Right.
I have a few friends of mine that says otherwise.
Yeah, right. So, again, I try to limit that, or at least in the past I did.
Yeah.
To mostly close friends and family. But I'm going to be, kind of turning back to my roots a little bit, if you will.
Well, I mean, historically, how come you've moved more to the commercial stuff and product photography than families?
For a couple of reasons. So I started out doing mostly people.
Yeah, mostly people. That's how you started.
Doing families and individuals and things like that. But initially to kind of broaden my abilities with respect to the art of photography. Commercial photography is vastly different than just people photography, if you will, or doing candids, things like that, or doing event photography, you know what I mean, where, you know, whether it's a wedding or it's a corporate event or something like that. Commercial photography typically involves photographing people or products for a specific reason. So they're already having a concept, an idea in their mind. They typically have, you know, an art director who I'll consult with, who will say, like, you know what, just a total white background. We don't want anything other than, you know, the watch being shown, you know, or what have you, or the sneaker, or what have you, know what I mean, and things like that. So I'm really just kind of bringing their vision to light, but it's very technical when you're doing that.
Yes.
All the, you know, the fundamentals of photography remain across, you know what I mean? Like,
but I think that technical piece is what you actually like.
Exactly. Yeah. So then that's very challenging. You know what I mean? Like the lighting has to be perfect. And the lighting has to be directed in a specific way. Yeah. You know what I mean? And you know, and so that's a large part of the reason why I did it. A second part of the reason is that as I became a professional photographer, I wanted to work with other professional artists. And so again, this allowed me a way to do that. You know, a lot of companies and people,
makes sense.
You know, whether they're fashion designers, you know, they have teams. Everybody has a team now.
Yeah.
I think that word is overused. But again, you know, there are other people that are working in industries that have, you know, where art is employed in a major kind of way. So it did that. And what it also did for me, why I stayed kind of focused on that is, to be truthfully honest, the market for photographers has become and still remains very saturated. Mm-hmm. And I was finding myself having to compete with people. So like I used to do weddings, for instance, right? Mm-hmm. And I meet with a client, do a consultation and whatever, and then I'd be like, okay, so based on kind of what you were looking for, here's my price list, my package list or whatever. And I would hear people saying constantly, you know, well, I spoke to this, you know, you want to charge me, you know, $7,000 to photograph my wedding. I met with another photographer who said, they did the whole thing for $800. I ain't $800. And I'm like, wow. And so, I wasn't mad at the potential client, but I was getting, you know, frustrated just by the whole
competitive space and more saturated space.
The saturated space. I don't look at as a competitive space.
But just competing with other people's pricing and
exactly. You're competing with other people's pricing. That's a good way to look at it. You know what I mean? I look at no photographer whether you know, I'm still learning. You know what I mean? I haven't learned everything there is to know about photography. Yeah. You know, I learn something new about photography probably every week. You know what I mean? Who's your iconic photographer in the photography space that you like aspire to? Like, yeah, man, I admire that guy. Like, I'm trying to get my photos, you know, like his or hers. Or so initially, I mean, it's countless. You know what I mean? Yeah. But the ones that immediately come to mind and that remain in my heart are folks like James Van Der Zee, African American photographer, going back to the 20s and 30s. Had a studio in Harlem. So a lot of those retro images that people may have seen, Van Der Zee responsible for capturing a lot of those. Gordon Parks, you know, was another one. Any contemporary photographers? There are some that I admire, but not so much as I admire in the sense that like mentors of yours. Yeah, like exactly that. You know, that I would be looking to, you know, like go to workshops and things like that. Yeah. Not that they didn't have anything to teach me, but I've been doing this for so long, you know what I mean? It's like I'm kind of, you know, the work that they're doing, you know, is on par with the work that I'm doing. Yeah. Or that the skill sets that they are sharing in workshops or what have you, I've already obtained, things like that. There's certainly a number of local photographers who I admire, you know. Comes the name Rodney Dabney, Anthony DiCarlo is another one. One photographer who I am currently mentoring, who has a lot of ability and is going to be, I think, I think history is going to view her as one of the really good photographers to come out of New Haven, Connecticut, is Ebony McKelvey. She goes by Ebony B. She's my mentee. She's really becoming a strong photographer. But there are a number of other local photographers, that I admire, and national photographers.
Earlier when you were talking about the, kind of the journey from starting with families and then transitioning into commercial and how it's more, technical. I had thought of one of my favorite images of yours in the commercial space, but I didn't want to cut you off. And it was when it popped in my mind the minute you said sneaker, and you have like this photo that you did. If you still have it, if you can find it, I'll try to like find it. I feel like I might have took a screenshot with my phone the day I saw it. Maybe I could have it pop up on the screen here, like do a picture in a picture. That'd be cool. But like you have like this, it was a picture of a Michael Jordan sneaker. And it's like, the photo looks like the sneaker is hovering in midair, just like, and it was just.
What color is the sneaker?
I want to say it was a black and white sneaker.
Okay. I
feel like it was mostly white.
A lot of photographs.
I think it was mostly white. I just can't think of the other color that was there. I want to say it was black.
I think I know the image.
But what I loved about, other than the fact that it looked like it was just hovering there, that was awesome to me. But I love that it looked like you controlled the light on that sneaker so almost like you had like some super flashlight that you just held in front of it. And I'm just like, how in the world do you limit and sort of slice this light just to be on this shoe and this piece like this? And it was like how you described with the whole just really, really technical part of art. It looked so difficult of a picture to pull off. And I can imagine, like I said, as I was listening to you, that's the part that has drawn you over the recent years to commercial work, is because that's not easy.
Right. So, I think I know the image that you're talking about. It was for a commercial client. And that photo it required, that specific shoot required the use of, I want to say, it was like an 8-light setup just to photograph that one sneaker.
That's insane.
Like, so I remember, right. So it was kind of lit from above. It was lit from below. Like you had to see the sole. There was like a little logo on the tongue. Yeah. There was
insane.
There was a light.
We gotta find that photo. We're gonna have it come across the screen.
Yeah. And I think I may have even I'm sure I photographed not just the sneaker itself, what the final image was that you're referring to, but I think I photographed the set. So I'll try to show you.
I know.
If I could find it, that was a few years back.
Yeah, that was a while back.
But yeah, hopefully I can find it, and you can maybe put it in the.
What's one of your favorite personal, just in commercial space, like works of art, like things you photographed that you were like, I did that. That's like one of my best.
I've done stuff for. I've shot some Ralph stuff that I like. That was
when you say that, Ralph, you mean
Ralph Lauren.
No, but like what? He has several different types of product. Like, so
so
clothing.
This was clothing done on a soccer field. I did another ad for Maybelline.
Maybe
makeup
it's
artist.
Maybelline.
Yep. I did one for a watch company that I really liked. I've done a bunch of liquor ads.
Yeah.
I don't.
Oh, you have one of those that I actually like too, where you actually had. Captured, I think it would look like the condensation of like the glass and like
the champagne.
It's the stuff that you like when you're flipping through magazines and you see these ads and you're like, wow, that looks so good. Or how did they get the? It looks like there's wet bubbles on the outside. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's what I liked. About being in a commercial space.
Yeah.
And being in a studio. Because it's a controlled environment. And what I like is seeing people's reaction.
Yeah.
The client, starting with the client, when they see the image, and to know that this isn't photoshopped. Right?
Yeah.
And it blows people's minds because they're like, people are like, man, you had to Photoshop that. You had to Photoshop that. And I'm like, no, that's not Photoshop.
Which is why it's awesome to photograph your
exactly.
set.
It's at the exactly. It's at the point of capture. And what a lot of people don't understand is these types of images have existed since the creation of photography. When you think about, if you look at like old magazine covers or what have you, and they had these really cool images on them or whatever, there was no Photoshop. There were no personal computers. So these folks, these photographers, had to literally sit there, build the whole set, do controlled lighting, schematics, setups, techniques, however you want to describe it. And really take a deliberate approach to creating those images. And that's what I really, really like. You know what I mean? There's been
That's what I really like, man.
That image, to get back to the sneaker image, I think I know the one you're talking about. That was photographed over the course of 4 days. Like I had to do the set first, right? The background that you're going to see and all of that, or what have you. Then I had to come up with the lighting schematic, right? So for me, I'm a type of photographer, like I write it all out. I'll draw like a mock-up, literally draw it of what the set is going to look like, where the lights need to be placed and things like that. As a starting point. You make adjustments and things like that. But, and then, you know, I get all the equipment together. What am I going to need? You know what I mean? This, that, or whatever. And then I get all it together and I put it together. And so like, and then then you photograph it, right? And so, like I said, I think at the beginning of this talk was that, you know, I'm the type, you know, photographer, you know, I want at the point of capture, you know, when I release the shutter, I want my image to be 90% done. Yeah. At a minimum at that point. Yeah. 90% done. And what I mean by 90% done is that, you know, I don't have to go into Photoshop or whatever to do. All I'm doing is doing some color correction, you know what I mean? Some sharpening maybe, some contrast. Maybe and these are things that you
cropping
would have done.
Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. These are the cropping. Right, exactly. These are things that you would have done in a traditional darkroom with chemicals anyway, right? And that's the school I'm from. So I think that that's got a lot to do with it. And I'm grateful for that. You know, I think that for everything that modern technical digital photography provides the photographer, what it robs them of is that time that is needed to truly learn the art of photography and understand. Like when my approach to photography is, I can look at the subject, and before I even pick the camera up, I know what lens I need. I have a good sense of what the settings are going to be. You know, I essentially, I have, you know, you do photography for as long as I do, and I think a lot of photographers out there will probably be able to relate to this, is you don't have, you know, there's something that most people have heard of is called a photographic memory. But that's not what I'm talking about. What you develop is photographic sight. And what that is you start to see the world as a photograph. Whether you're driving down the street, walking down the street, sitting in your office at work, or ordering some food in a restaurant, I see the whole world framed in photographs. You know, my mind I've been taking photographs for so long that my mind has become shaped that way. It's framed that way, if you will. Yeah. And so, so my approach to when I want to create an image starts with that. I see it already in my head before I even pick the camera up. And that's very, very useful. And that's one of the things I think that digital photography robs photographers of, right? Because their preview is where now? Their preview is on the back of the camera. They pick up the camera, click, click, click. Let me look at it. Does it look the way I want it to look? They start there, as opposed to saying, wow, that would make a phenomenal image. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so for me, you know, coming from the traditional school of photography, that being, you know, a film photography. Yeah. I'm very grateful for that. I've learned a lot from that. And unlike so many other different industries or art forms or what have you, they get replaced completely when the new thing comes. Whereas with photography, yeah, digital, the SD card or the media card or the compact flash card, whatever you're using, has replaced the film, but that's all it's really done. The fundamentals remain. I could put that lens on a digital camera, I can put that lens on a film camera, and it's going to perform and do the same function.
Yeah.
You understand? And so the one thing I am grateful is that digital photography hasn't totally thrown the baby out with the bathwater, if you will. There are still a number
of people behind the thing.
Yeah, exactly. Right. The people are the ones who've done that. So, that's what I really, truly, truly enjoy about photography. And it's been that way with photography from the very beginning. I remember reading about photographers and the birth of photography. I've studied all of this throughout my years in photography, is that one of the things, when the first cameras were invented, people looked at them as a novelty, right? They said that, this is a novelty. This, it's not something that should be taken seriously, because back then depictions of people or scenery or whatever were done by painters, right? And so then once photography started to advance more or whatever, the painters kind of rose up and were like, this is making a mockery of our art form and this, that, or whatever. And then there were other people who were saying that this is going to be the death of the painter. You know what I mean? Painters are going to, and time has proven that not to be true, right? Painters are doing well. People still appreciate, paintings. People, commission painters and things like that. Similarly, though, with the birth of digital photography, people looked at it as a novelty. I was one of those people. I was like, this is a novelty. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a real photographer. I use film, you know what I mean? And this, that, or what have you. And I resisted, like a lot of photographers. I had tons of professional photographers at the time. We were in open rebellion. We will never embrace digital photography. To do so would be an affront to our profession. Like, we're never going to do that, this, that, or whatever.
And then you all folded.
Now today, right, exactly. Now, I won't say that we folded. I think that we came to understand and realize that this wasn't a real threat. To our art form. And in fact, it was just merely an enhancement of it. Like one thing, like workflow. It immediately, reduced the time in the workflow. Like, I would have to load the camera with film, be limited to only 24 or 36 exposures, then take the canister out, load up more film. I might have missed a shot during that time. But then after all of that, I got to develop the negatives, then print the negatives onto paper. So it helped with workflow. Like, so once I, embraced it and looked at it as less of a threat to my craft, I fully embraced it. That's not to say that, I totally have gotten away from film. I own film cameras. I use them for special projects. There are some clients who want film.
Really?
And what I like about film,
how recent have you, like, what's the last time you've actually had to, like,
load up a film camera?
I mean, like, actually, like, I guess, produce the film.
Oh, so I don't have a dark room anymore and things like that. But the last time I shot film was a month ago.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? So, I enjoy film. The one thing that, and this is true, and this is a saying, it's not mine, don't ask me where it came from, but it is true, and I do embrace it, and I do believe it. And anybody who studied both film and digital, I think will agree with me, is this. There's a saying that says, film has a soul. That film photography has a soul, and it is true. I could take you and I standing side by side. We talked about being in the pit and photographers being side by side. We could have both shot that show using essentially the same equipment, except I'm using film and you're using digital, and then we show the same print side by side to someone who doesn't know anything and ask them, which of those two images do you feel seem to be more alive? And I guarantee you 9 out of 10 would say the film one.
Wow.
And it's true. You can see it. You can see it. Film has something called a grain on it. Digital has grain too, but it's digital grains. It's more of an artifact. Yeah. Whereas on film, there has something called emulsions that are on the film. These are the light capturing diodes. Yep. Like on a digital camera now, you have a chip in the back. You know what I mean? And it has all these little digital pixels. Mm-hmm. The pixels would be the emulsions that are on film now. It's the modern day of emulsions. Which create grain in an image, a final image. And even on film, me as a photographer, I want that grain to be shown. Like on a digital image, when you see that grain or the pixels, it detracts from the image. Yeah. Whereas on film, it actually enhances. It can enhance. Some of them you don't want to see the grain, but certainly in a lot of black and white imagery, specifically in particular, it helps to again bring that image to life. So like I said, film has a soul, and so that's the one thing that I have and I've looked. Where that digital photography has not been able to recreate, to trick the trained eye of the photographer. I think that it has come close. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of adjustments that you can make in a digital darkroom, or they have like presets that they call them in like Photoshop and in Lightroom, where you can one of them is like aged image. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you can do that,
all the presets.
Sepia tone, things like that.
Yeah,
you can you can try to mimic it. I don't think you can duplicate it though.
Before we wrap up this episode, could you? And you said almost 40 years now doing photography?
40, doing photography professionally, about 25.
In all those years of photography, could you share with us if only one, if you could give us more than one, great. What's something that photography, could you say or point to, has taught you about life in all the years that you've been doing photography? With it being such an intimate, art form, I imagine I've at interviews I've spoken with painters, other types and other forms of artists, musicians, songwriters, and I think because it's an intimate art form, they have been able to sort of extrapolate, life principles or things that they've kind of used in other parts of their life from that. So hence why I bring the question to you.
One is going to be a cliche, and so it's two things. One is more a cliche, and one I think is more important. So the first one is the cliche. The one thing that photography has taught me over the years is the more things change, the more they stay the same. More specifically, people. I've met so many different people from different backgrounds or what have you.
Even different generations.
Just generations or what have you. You know what I mean? People
are the same.
Are you know what I mean? They you know what I mean? They're different, obviously, but their attitudes, I guess. People's attitudes, about their life, in their world, in their place in it. Yeah, just people's attitudes, that's photography has allowed me to, come in contact with so many different people. And it's just so weird, you know what I mean? Whether they're rich or poor or whatever, come from challenging circumstances or those where life was, pretty simple for them. People tend to, have the same attitudes about life. They all want what's best for them, their families and things like that. Everybody's working, to achieve their own desires, get their own desires met and things like that. They may be doing it in different ways, but they are, they're still doing it.
And that's with rich people or poor people.
Rich or poor, right? Exactly. And here's another thing too: is that no matter how people project themselves on the outside, inwardly, we all have our own struggles. We all are dealing with something, you know what I mean? I've met rich people, on set and things like that. People, I mean, really rich people, people who you would know, you would see on TV or in a magazine. And then, I'm talking to them. And what's interesting about talking to people who have notoriety, not just rich, but maybe rich and famous.
Yeah.
They love talking to people who aren't rich and famous because they view that as like, yo, like you were like probably, if I had somebody say to me, like, you were like the realest person I've met in so long. Like rich people.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Oh, like having like real just conversations.
It's like real conversations, you know what I mean? Like they want to know about my life, what I'm doing, where am I going after I leave here? Because I ain't going to the after party. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to be at Cabo for the big, you know what I mean? Or,
I'm not going to the yacht party.
Yeah, or going, I'm not doing
CBS anything. Interview.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like they all kind of, they're so fascinating and interesting because, and I think part of that, interested in you because I think a part of that I think is they're constantly being asked about themselves, right? Like what, what's next? What's next? What's next? What are you doing with your life? I guess I can imagine.
Yeah.
But that's one thing, you know what I mean? I've always, found like interesting. That. But getting back to your question, I said that I had two answers for it. The second answer is that photography is very important and intricate to advancing human knowledge and advancing how the choices that humans make and advancing how they see the world. It helps human beings to get a true sense of the whole world that they live in. Because a photograph taken on the other side of the world can now be shared on this side of the world instantaneously. Yeah. And it can be shared by the everyday individual who just has a cell phone. Whereas, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years ago, people didn't walk around with cameras all the time. Everybody's walking around with a camera now.
Yeah.
So I think that that's important. But to end on a friendlier note or a happier note, I think that photography does allow just that, for people to be in the position to instantly capture happy moments that unfold in their lives. Whether it be a father standing at a beach, or at a lake photographing their kid, hopefully not slipping and falling and busting it, of feeding ducks, to, being at a birthday party or a wedding or what have you. You know what I mean? Yeah. It has put photography in the hands of everyone, both professional, novice photographer, or people who don't even really have any interest in photography, but may have an interest in capturing, cherished moments that unfold in their lives. So I think that one is more important.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for giving me some pointers for the excellent studio setup. Don't be surprised, ladies and gentlemen, if you see me with some blue lights at the studio. But it speaks to, again, the wealth of knowledge that just you have of this art form of bending and manipulating light that we know today as photography. I'll leave our final words with you. As I've heard you say a ton of times, I'll let you have the last word and let everybody know where they can maybe find some of your work on the World Wide Web or across social media.
Cool, I appreciate that. So, I'm not a big social media person. I don't do a lot of social media, right? But I do have a website.
All his clients come to him. They find him.
Right. But I do have a website, elmcityimages.com. That's, again, elmcityimages.com. You can go there and see some of my work, kind of get a sense of my style and things like that. And by way of kind of final thoughts, I would just like to, encourage folks, whether you're doing this for a hobby or as a passion or even as a business, you know what I mean? Just, take as many images as you can. Continue to take photographs, not just machine gun and taking images, but really just, kind of think about, the types of images that you want to take. Learn as much about photography as you can. I mean, you can learn how to build a space rocket to the moon on YouTube now. You know what I mean? So please, use all those types of resources to really learn about the art of photography. You know what I mean? And take photographs, because those two things are what are going to make you, really good at photography and help you to develop your own style and an approach to photography, which I think is very important as well. And network with other photographers. Photography seems to be like very competitive in this sense that like photographers don't want to talk to each other. I have tons of photographers that I talk to, but I'm speaking more so to the younger photographers,
the
now,
newer photographers coming
right?
out.
And I think that has a lot to do with the reasons why they're doing photography. It's a business for them.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? They don't want anybody to like take their business away from this, that, or whatever. And if you take a different approach and you say, you know what? No, I'm an artist. I want to be an artist. And I hope that these young photographers who are, promoting themselves as professional photographers are doing that. Get a mentor. You need to have a mentor. You know what I mean? Even to this day, you know what I mean? I did say that, there's not a lot of photographers that I'm not, that I'm not, looking to, go to their workshops and things like that. But that's not to say that there's not things that I can't learn. I learn things from a lot of photographers on a regular basis, maybe not in a formal setting, or I don't have a mentor photographer, but, that is important though. You know what I mean? That you do go out there and do it, especially if you're a young photographer. When I was a young photographer, I did a lot of that. I went to tons of workshops. I spent countless days and hours in New York and making that investment. And invest in yourself. You know what I mean? And there's a cost associated with that. You know what I mean? But again, we live in the digital age. There's a lot of stuff you can learn for free.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So do that. And, and if you can, get a mentor. You know what I mean? A photographer that's been a photographer longer than you, somebody that knows a little bit more about photography than you do. I'm a big proponent on sharing knowledge. I think the only real knowledge is that knowledge that is shareable, that is shared. Because, if knowledge dies with you, it really isn't knowledge at that point, as far as I'm concerned. So,
love that.
Continue to create and make images, learn as much as you can about photography, more specifically the equipment that you're using. Yeah. And don't, and get away from the idea that, that, I can just, buy this fancy camera and it's going to create these nice images, because I can guarantee you it won't. Yeah. It might over time if you learn about it and learn how to use it, yes. But out of the box, nah. Technology has yet to produce that camera. That's not going to happen, because the camera is, like I said, it's just like that Ferrari or Lamborghini. It'll look nice or whatever, but until you insert a human being into it and press that button, that's it. You know what I mean, and put it in gear, you know what I mean, and know that it needs high octane gas. Yeah. As a means of transportation, it's going to be useless to you. Okay, and that's that.
I dig it. I'm not going to follow up with anything behind that. He dropped enough bars for you guys. Again, thank you for tuning into another episode of Free Lunch. Is free food for your soul, y'all. Peace.
Peace, everybody.